Has it ever happened to you that you're doing everything right, but you feel like something is missing? You participate, you talk about faith, you pray, but deep down, there's an emptiness you can't explain. As if, even following all the steps, the connection isn't complete. If this has crossed your mind, know that you are not alone. This has been happening to many people, and the worst part, many don't even realize it. They continue in the same routine, thinking they are on the right path, but in reality, they are being led to a dangerous place without noticing. But why does this happen? And more importantly, how do you know if this is happening to you? Because if it is, something needs to change. And fast. Today we're going to talk about something no one likes to admit, but that may be affecting you more than you think. We'll see how small signs may be showing that your faith is being weakened, how this happens without you realizing it, and mainly, how to get out of this state before it's too late. And I'll tell you now, the last part of this video brings a challenge that few people can fulfill. Will you be able to? So stay until the end, because this could completely change the way you see your own spiritual life. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but deep down, there's an emptiness you can't explain? You participate, you listen, you talk about faith, but when you're alone, it feels like something is missing. Have you ever noticed how some people spend years on this path and nothing changes? As if they were repeating an endless cycle. The truth is that there is something very subtle happening. Something that doesn't shout, but whispers. Something that doesn't appear obviously, but infiltrates little by little. It's not about the absence of faith, but something much worse. A lifeless faith. A faith that has become part of the routine, but has lost its essence. Here, everything seems to be in place. There are beautiful words. There are people who know exactly what to say. But there is a problem that few see. The disconnect between what is believed and what is actually lived. And this disconnect doesn't happen overnight. It comes slowly, silently. One day, you realize you're there, but without feeling. Maybe this has already happened to you. Or maybe it's happening now. You believe, but the belief seems distant. You speak, but the words no longer touch your heart. You listen, but everything sounds repetitive. The problem is not what is done, but what has become automatic. Many do not realize that this is a trap, a well-planned one. Because if it were obvious, no one would fall. It's not about making you give up your faith all at once. It's about emptying it, leaving just a shell, leaving just a habit. You follow the steps, but you no longer feel the purpose. Now, you might think, but I still believe. And yes, believing is important. But believing without feeling, without transformation, without surrender, this becomes dangerous. Because that's how many begin to lose themselves without realizing it. Have you ever seen people who are there, always present, but their lives never change? They talk about all this, but when we look at the way they live, there is a chasm between what they say and what they do. Not because they want to deceive, but because they were led to this place without realizing it. And perhaps that is the worst part. What began with passion, with a desire for transformation, has become an empty repetition. And that's how everything fades little by little. It's not immediate. It's not with a big shock. It's slow, without the person noticing. So, the question here is not just about what you do, but about what you feel when you do it. When was the last time you really felt? When was the last time something truly touched you? When was the last time you felt connected? If there is a distance between what you believe and what you actually live, something needs to change. Because this path does not lead where you think. He just makes you believe you're on the right path, when in fact, you're standing still. If everything we've talked about so far has made sense to you, then you've already realized that this problem is real. It doesn't just happen to other people. It could be happening to you right now, without you even realizing it. But what to do with this information? How to get out of this state where everything seems right, but deep down, something is wrong, because knowing isn't enough. You need to act. That's why I've made special material available to help you get out of this situation. In the first pinned comment, you'll find a digital book that shows in detail how not to fall into these traps that weaken faith. This book will help you understand exactly how the enemy works subtly to weaken your spiritual life. And there's more. This material won't be available forever. There are only a few copies, and it will soon be taken down. So if you feel you need to change something now, don't put it off. Click on the first pinned comment and get yours. Now that you've realized how this disconnect can happen, we need to talk about something even deeper. Something that many people ignore, but that is happening right before our eyes. It doesn't start drastically. It's not a sudden detour. It's a process, one step at a time. Small concessions, small adjustments. At first, it seems harmless. A choice that doesn't make much difference. But little by little, everything starts to change. And when you realize it, you no longer know how you got there. He doesn't want you to abandon your faith overnight. That would be too obvious. He wants you to believe you're still on the right path, while in fact you're getting further and further away. He works with subtlety, with small allowances, with that feeling that it's not that serious. Have you noticed how certain things that used to seem wrong now seem normal? How some choices you would have avoided before are now part of your routine? How certain thoughts that used to bother you now go unnoticed? This is the method. He doesn't come ripping out your faith. He just weakens, little by little, what was once strong. And the most dangerous part? You think everything is fine. You still participate. You still talk about God. You still keep up appearances. But inside, something has changed. Something has been worn down. And you didn't even notice. He doesn't need you to stop believing. He just needs your faith to become shallow. He just needs you to stop going deeper. Stop searching. Stop questioning. He wants you to settle, to think you already know enough, to no longer see the need to grow. Think about how many times you've postponed that sincere conversation with God. How many times you've chosen the easiest path instead of the right one. How many times you've put off what you should have done now. It is in these moments that He acts, not to take you away completely, but to keep you exactly where you are. And that is the real danger, because you don't feel like you're moving away. You don't see a reason to change. You just keep going with the flow, stuck in an empty routine where everything seems normal, but in fact something very wrong is happening. So now stop for a moment and think. Think about your last decisions, your last thoughts, the little things you accepted without realizing it. Could it be that, without noticing, you are already being led to this place? Because that's the strategy. He doesn't attack head-on. He wears you down. He weakens you. He makes you just another one, without impact, without change, without life. Now that we've talked about this disconnect and how everything happens subtly, it's time to see what's really behind it. Because this weakening is not random. It follows a pattern. It creates profiles. And maybe you see yourself in one of them. The first is the one who adapts to the environment. He doesn't fully commit, but he doesn't walk away either. He just adjusts. On Sunday, he's there, participating, talking about faith. But when he leaves, his decisions follow a different path. It's not stated, it's not obvious, but it's there. He balances everything so he doesn't lose anything. He wants to be on one side and the other at the same time. But that never works. Because sooner or later, something weighs more. And he realizes he was never fully committed. Then there's the one who always points out the mistakes of others. He believes he's doing something good. After all, he's just telling the truth. But the problem is not what he says, but how he says it. He uses words as a weight, not as a path. Instead of bringing growth, he creates distance. Instead of showing hope, he only pushes away. And the worst part? He doesn't even realize it. Because in his eyes, everything he does seems right. But deep down, the faith he believes he's defending becomes hard, rigid, lifeless. And then we have the one who trusts only in what he does. He believes his strength lies in his own actions. He sees himself as someone righteous, someone who is always right. But this confidence, instead of bringing him closer to God, creates a wall. Because he forgets that everything comes from above, not from his own hands. He doesn't ask for help. He doesn't acknowledge his flaws. And this absolute certainty becomes his greatest weakness. Because when everything falls apart, he realizes he built his faith on something that couldn't hold anything. Lastly, there's the one who knows the truth, but remains silent. He's afraid. Afraid of losing something. Afraid of being seen in a way he doesn't want. Afraid of taking a stand. And this fear paralyzes him. He doesn't deny his faith, but he doesn't defend it either. He simply remains silent. And this silence consumes him. Because there comes a time when he no longer knows if he's just avoiding problems or if he's already accepted living this way. Now think, have you ever seen someone like this? Or maybe you've already noticed something like this in yourself. Because the greatest danger is not just being one of these profiles. The danger is in thinking this is normal, that it's always been this way, that there's nothing wrong. But there is, and it's time to see it. Now that you've seen how many are being led down paths that seem right, but are actually weakening their faith, I want to know. Have you noticed this before? Have you seen anyone fit these profiles without noticing? Or maybe you've identified yourself in some of these points. Comment below, because I want to know what you think about this. What caught your attention the most so far? What made you think the most? And don't leave yet, because what we're going to see now is even more serious. There are many people who think they are safe, but in reality are living a faith that can't withstand a single difficulty. Let's talk about that now. Now that we've seen the 4 profiles that end up being weakened, we need to talk about something even more serious. Because it's not just about falling into these traps. The problem goes beyond that. The problem is what happens when faith becomes shallow, fragile, without depth. Many people think they are safe. They think they are on the right path. After all, they are there, doing everything they've always done. But the question that needs to be asked is, does this have support? Does this have strength? Or is everything hanging by a thread? A weak faith doesn't crumble overnight. It follows a process. First, everything seems normal. The words still come out. The actions still happen. But little by little, something changes. The intensity decreases. The connection becomes mechanical. And the spiritual life becomes increasingly fragile. Have you noticed how some people seem strong until something happens? Until a problem appears? Until something unexpected arrives? And suddenly, everything falls apart. Everything crumbles. Not because the problem was too big, but because what was supporting it was already weak for a long time. The problem is not what happens on the outside. The problem is what was already failing on the inside. Shallow faith is dangerous because it gives a false sense of security. The person believes they are okay. They believe they are firm. But in practice, there's nothing solid there. And when the time comes to face something difficult, they realize they have nothing to hold on to. Maybe this has already happened to you. Maybe you've already felt that when things got tough, your strength wasn't enough. Or maybe you're seeing this happen to someone close to you. People who always talked about faith, but who, at the first difficulty didn't know what to do. And this is what needs to be understood. Faith is not about words. Faith is not about empty gestures. Faith needs to have roots. It needs to have depth. If it's just a habit, a repetition, it won't hold up. It won't sustain. Now, think about this. Have you been living a strong faith or a fragile faith? Do you really feel that your connection with God is something solid? Or could it be that, without realizing it, you are just repeating something that has already lost its essence? If faith is not rooted, it will not resist. And when the time comes to face something real, will it hold up? Now that we've talked about how faith can become fragile without the person realizing it, we need to see something that has even greater weight. Something that not only weakens, but paralyzes. Something that makes many give up before they even begin. Fear. Fear has a silent way of acting. It infiltrates thoughts, decisions, the small choices of everyday life. And when you least expect it, it's already in control. It makes you think it's better to be quiet, that it's safer not to take a stand, that avoiding confrontation is the easiest way, and little by little, it convinces you that this choice is not about weakness, but about wisdom, that it's better to avoid than to lose something important. But the truth is that fear does not protect. Fear imprisons. It does not strengthen. It steals. It takes away your courage, your will, your strength. Have you noticed how some people, even knowing what is right, choose silence? How they avoid talking about their faith, avoid taking a stand, avoid any situation that might bring discomfort. And all this because, deep down, they are afraid of what they might lose. Perhaps it's the fear of losing the approval of others, of not being accepted, of becoming a target of criticism. Perhaps it's the fear of losing a position, a status, a respect that took years to build. And fear becomes an invisible guide, dictating every step, every answer, every attitude. But what many don't realize is that fear doesn't just silence, it shuts down, it weakens, it erases what was once strong. And the worst part? It does this without haste, without fanfare, just keeping the person paralyzed, living on autopilot, without daring to leave their place. Now think, how many times have you felt that you should have done something, but gave up? How many times have you been silent when you knew you needed to speak? How many times have you let an opportunity pass because fear spoke louder? Because that's how it works. Fear makes it seem safer not to expose yourself. But in truth, it is fear that is keeping you away from what really matters. It prevents you from growing, from living your faith with truth, from being who you really should be. And that's why we need to talk about this. Because fear is not just a feeling, it's a strategy. It's used exactly to keep you still. Because as long as you are trapped in it, you will never be a threat. Now that we've talked about how fear weakens and paralyzes, tell me, have you ever felt this in your life? Have you ever been through times when you knew what you needed to do, but remained silent for fear of what might happen? If so, know that this is not unusual, but it's also not something that can be ignored. And what if I told you that there is a way out of this cycle? That there is a way to strengthen yourself and not fall into this trap again? In the first pinned comment, I left some special material that can help you with this. It's a digital book that delves even deeper into this topic and gives you tools to strengthen yourself spiritually. But pay attention, there are few copies and it may soon no longer be available. Now, before we continue, I want to know, at what point in your life did fear prevent you from acting? Write in the comments, because this can help many people who are going through the same situation. And now let's get into a subject that many people avoid, but that may be happening to you without you realizing it. let's talk about something that may be weakening your faith without you noticing. Now that we've talked about fear and how it paralyzes, we need to get into an even more dangerous problem. Something that acts silently and often disguised as something good. Pride. Spiritual pride doesn't present itself in an obvious way. It doesn't arrive as a clear mistake. On the contrary, it appears as conviction, as firmness, as absolute certainty that you are on the right path. And that's where the danger lies. The person starts well. They start searching, wanting to learn, wanting to grow. But at some point, something changes. They start to believe they already know everything, that they already understand everything. And without realizing it, they stop searching. They stop growing. They stop learning. Have you noticed how some people talk about faith as if they own the truth? As if they had all the answers? They don't accept questions. They don't accept different opinions. And if someone points out something that needs to change, the answer comes quickly. I know what I'm doing. This is the problem with pride. It prevents the person from seeing their own flaws. They believe they are already strong enough. But the truth is that this strength is only appearance. Because inside, something is crumbling. Pride pushes away. It creates barriers. It closes its eyes to the need for change. And over time, it leads to spiritual loneliness. Because those who think they already know everything stop listening. And those who stop listening stop growing. But the worst part is that this person doesn't realize it. They think they are getting stronger and stronger, when in fact, they are becoming more and more isolated, more and more distant, more and more empty. Now think for a moment. Have you ever seen someone like this? Or have you ever felt this in yourself? That resistance when someone tries to correct you? That feeling that no one else understands the way you do? If so, this could be a warning sign. Because spiritual pride is treacherous. It makes you believe you're doing well, when in fact you're drifting away. It makes you trust your own vision so much that you stop depending on God. And that is the greatest danger. Because when you rely only on your own strength, the fall can be great. Now that we've talked about disconnection, the traps that weaken us, and the mistakes that can lead us astray without realizing it, comes the most important question. What are you going to do about it? Because knowing what is wrong doesn't change anything if you don't decide to act. If everything that was said here just goes in one ear and out the other, then all this time was wasted. But if something bothered you, if something made sense, if something made you think, then this could be the opportunity to change. True faith is not based on empty words. It requires courage. It requires you to look at yourself honestly, to see where you need to improve, to have the humility to acknowledge your flaws. You can't go halfway. You can't want the benefits without making the commitment. Either you live this faith truly, or you are only deceiving yourself. And that doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you'll never fail. But it does mean you need to be willing to grow, to seek more, to leave this state of comfort where many find themselves. Now I want you to stop for a moment and think. Think about everything we've talked about so far, the dangers that exist, the signs that you may have already noticed in your own life. And most importantly, think about the answer to this question. What has been your biggest challenge in faith? Write it in the comments. Be honest. What has weakened you? What has prevented you from truly living this faith? You don't need to explain everything in detail. Just put into words what has been weighing on your heart. This may seem like a small step, but it's actually a big start. Because change only begins when you recognize where you are and where you need to go. Now that you've made it this far, I have a challenge for you. What are you going to do with everything you've heard? Are you just going to stick to your routine, or actually take action to change your spiritual life? If this content has helped you in any way, I want to ask you two things. First, write in the comments what impacted you the most in this video. What moved you the most? This might be exactly what someone needs to read today. And second, don't let this knowledge sit idle. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. It could be a friend, a relative, or even someone you barely know, but who you know could benefit from it. Take advantage and click on the videos that are appearing on the screen now. They will help you understand even more about this subject and strengthen your spiritual life. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button and activate notifications. That way, you won't miss any content that could completely change the way you see faith. And if this video resonated with you, leave a like. This helps me understand that this content is helping you and motivates me to continue bringing more studies like this.